All right, for the first part of this lab this week, we are going to implement the firewall in its default config. We will plug the WAN port into a network that will give us DHCP. We'll plug a PC into one of the LAN ports, and then we will connect and configure it. The IP address that the device should have is listed on the sticker, which is 192.168.1.99. So if you plug it in properly and turn it on, and then connect your PC in, you should be able to get out to the internet through the college network. So once that's done, we're going to log in and look around a bit. So this is the screen you get. Obviously, we should know that this is because this device has a self-signed certificate that we do not trust. Nothing to worry about at this point. We'll accept the risk and continue. The username is admin, and the password is blank to start with. It's going to force you to put a password, so use the word password. That's what some of the other classes use for the password. So use the word password for the password, hit OK, don't save it, then log in with the password. So at this point in our networking career, we should know certain things, but we're going to go ahead and specify a host name. Make the host name your last name dash firewall. That way we can use that to determine if it has a default config or not later. And we are not going to register with Forticare, so hit later for that. So now we get to the web interface. This device can do many things. Some of the things it can do requires a subscription, which we don't have for our lab devices, so we are basically going to be using this for pretty basic filtering on the firewall. So as I was about to say earlier, at this point in your CNT career, we hopefully know what needs to be done on a network device to make it work. So at this point, we need to have interfaces configured, we need to have routes configured, and we need to have security rules in place on the firewall to let traffic in and out. So once you know those things, anytime you get onto a new device, it's really just a matter of finding where it is that you configure those things. So just looking at this this interface, I'm going to go and guess that some of what I need to configure is going to be under the network tab. So I'm going to click on network, and I'm going to go to interfaces. And right now we're not really going to configure anything. We're just exploring the device. So in this case, we have the interface configuration. We have a LAN interface that is associated with the 3 LAN ports, and it has an IP address listed in a subnet mask, and then it lists what administrative ways we allow administrative access to it. Ping, HTTPS, SSH, HTTP, and then some Fortigate stuff we don't care about. The WAN interface is treated as a physical interface, and it is using the IP address it got from DHCP. So we can edit these things, which we're going to do later, but for now we're just going to hit the edit button and look at how would we change it. So if we want to change the IP address, we could type a different IP address in here. We want to switch it to DHCP, we could hit DHCP to do that. There is a built-in DHCP server already configured in the default config. It's giving out addresses 1.110 to 1.210. So if you wanted, if you change the internal IP and you want this device to continue giving out addresses for DHCP, you also need to change the scope you're using for that. Here's where we're allowing what's we're allowing into the device on the LAN interfaces. You could change this to meet your needs. You might not want to let FMG access in if you're not using a FortiGate manager connection. And then you hit OK. We're not going to do that right now. For the WAN interface, changes we would likely make is to change it to a manual address. Put in the address we want it to have. We might want to change what we're letting in from the outside. And that's really all we would change on the WAN interface, most likely. There is a possibility that if you did not plug your device in to the network before you turned it on, or if perhaps you plugged it into the wrong place, you did not get an IP address when it came up, After a while, it might on its own get an IP address, but if you do not have a public IP, you might be able to hit the renew button to get it to come up, or switch it to manual and hit OK, and then switch it back to DHCP, hit OK, and those are the ways you could possibly force it to renew the address. You could also possibly just disconnect the cable and reconnect it, and that might cause it when the state changes to try to get an IP address. Other thing we need to configure would be routes, potentially. So on the static routes page, we don't have any listed at this point. If we do a manual IP address on our WAN interface, we are most likely going to need to add a static route to let that traffic out. And depending on the network config we're going to do later in this lab, we will be sending traffic back in to our internal router. So we're going to need to add a static route to send that traffic to the router. So later on, we're going to be adding some routes at this page. The security rules are under policy and objects. We have an IPv4 policy. At this point, the default policy is to let everything out. Any source, any destination, any service, always enabled, will let everything out. And then we have an implicit deny rule that's dropping everything that's not allowed. We do not have any rules for WAN to LAN, so I'm assuming that means we're not letting anything in from the outside. So as we move forward in the lab, we're going to need to make some configuration changes to some of those things I've just shown you in order to implement this firewall within our network that we're going to be using. So more to come.